You and your white people stole hundreds of thousands of acres. When does the killing end?
What the?
Hank, you're terrible.
I am not...
Just give him his land back, Hank.
Hello all, this is Starbird, and I disagree. Before we start, as always, a big welcome to all my new subscribers, and a big thanks to those of you who are supporting this channel, or even just helping to spread my videos. It really helps, and you guys have assisted me in growing this channel quite rapidly as of late. I already have something special planned for 3,000 subs. So it looks like my 10 things about the land video has been mass false flagged and was thus pulled, and while I was able to successfully appeal this, in honor of this crap, I hereby declare this week South Africa Week. Barring anything massive happening elsewhere, I will be covering the situation in South Africa exclusively this week, and boy, do I have some treats for you. I also mentioned yesterday that I would now be keeping more of an eye on the comments of my videos, as apparently this is why I was given a strike, although fortunately it was taken back within 24 hours. Not anything I said, but simply not moderating my comments gave me a strike. I am not going to be deleting anything disagreeing with me, or even people who are just trolling or having a bit of fun, but I have a feeling that the racial epithets being used by some people on this channel are what is setting off the stupid algorithm YouTube has, so I will have to keep an eye on those. My apologies, I don't want to do this, but I do want to keep this channel. Anyway, on with the show. Today, in this video, I am going to look at 12 of the common arguments and myths put forward to justify land expropriation without compensation, or to try and argue that, well, nothing's going on in South Africa. And so hopefully next time you see someone using one of these stupid arguments, you have a good response. Myth number 1. The white minority owns 80% of the land. This is pretty much the myth being pushed by both the government and the far left in general to justify this crap, and so I'm tackling it first. The problem with this stat is that it's not only wrong, it's deliberately misleading. An old phrase comes to mind: there are lies, damn lies, and statistics. Man, I hate saying that word. You see, the people who put this 80% stat together relied on a study that not only has some major problems, but is in fact being completely ignored or twisted to push this myth that the white minority controls and uses most of the farmland in the country. Firstly, the government owns huge parts of the country. This number is disputed, but ranges from 5% in the Cape to 50% in the extremely fertile Natal region. And beyond this, the people who are actually using the farmland are almost exclusively either government or municipality, rising from 50% to almost 60% in the most fertile regions. Feel free to look at the study yourself. Private use of the land is less than 9%. Furthermore, the study, for some reason, included land owned by companies and trusts, including offshore concerns, urban real estate, and mining land in this stat, not just farmland. They are also using incredibly outdated stats going back to 1991, rather than more current data, which clearly demonstrates not only were the original stats misleading, thrown off by the Cape, but demonstrates how much the situation has changed, with the extremely fertile Limpopo and Natal farmlands being majority black-owned. Quite simply put, that stats being pushed by the far left are utter rubbish. Myth number 2. Well, fine then. What about the Cape? Well, that's actually an interesting question, but the answer seems to be that nobody really wants to buy this land, probably due to the more fertile land available elsewhere. In the most recent study, it was found that when the government purchased land for redistribution, there was little interest in the original ownership of land and more desire for the best farmlands available. It was also shown that government and municipal owned land has increased. Myth number 3. There is nothing happening to white farmers. This is another common one I see being put forward, especially in the media and generally in response to Lawrence Southern's and similar coverage. It relies on the fact that South Africa is a pretty rough country and that the murder rates in many areas are higher than the farm murder rates, and so, technically speaking, whites and farms are safer than some blacks in some informal settlements. No duh. This is rubbish for the simple reason that these other murders are not being done for the reasons of race. Farmers being targeted for torture and murder because they are white is nothing like people dying to street crime or gang violence. Myth number 4. This is just returning land to the rightful owners. As I have discussed before, ethno-state arguments aside, which tend to be very stupid, the original owners of the land, if you want to go back that far, are the Khoi, who, as a culture and a people, simply aren't really around anymore. Yes, as some people have pointed out, there are still some Khoi, and a lot of these are mixed race and are simply calling themselves Khoi because they have some Khoi blood in them. And if you want to go down that road, well, there's a reason that so many Boers have that one really dark-skinned kid. The people in South Africa now, most of them are fairly recent arrivals, and these are the people who really want the land. The Boers precede them by 200 years or more, and if you want to start the oppression Olympics, the Boers have suffered oppression and near genocide in the past at the hands of the British. Never forget, Malema and co. have no interest in helping those of mixed race, which includes the Khoi, or anyone that they don't consider to be pure black. Hell, they don't even care that much about individual black people, as we'll get into later on. Number 5. Whites did bad stuff in the past, and so are just getting their just desserts. This is another very common one, and it is simply rubbish. Every people, if you go back, were either mostly wiped out or did some bad stuff to prosper. This is history. It is not perfect. It is brutal, nasty, and unfair. But you cannot keep going back to stuff that happened in the past and using it to justify atrocities in the future, because A, you can find atrocities in almost every people's past, and B, if you go down that path, nothing will ever get better. Number 6. No, but really, the land should not be owned by a single ethnic minority. I tackled this in point 1. It isn't, and the stats being used to push the idea that it is are absolute garbage. Even if the land is owned by certain individuals, trusts or companies, the majority of people using it are the government and municipalities in the area. The only areas where it seems to be true that the land is mostly white-owned are the Cape and, well, even when offered, people do not seem to want that land. And you know what? Even if it was true, this does not mean you can just swoop in and start kicking people off their land or allowing nasty little militias to kill them and do it for you, which unfortunately does seem to be the trend in Africa. if you want to take more of the land, make these farmers a better offer, and if they don't accept, make them a better offer, or just wait. The willing buyer, willing seller method has been clearly working, as we can see in KZN. Never forget, despite Malema and co trying so hard to make this a race thing, he is always quiet on exactly how the land is going to be doled out and to whom. South Africa is made up of incredibly varied tribes and peoples, many of whom have been interbreeding for years. I'll go into this a little bit later on. Myth number 7. No, but seriously, it's not fair. There are whites living on stolen land. The land should be given back to the original owners. Well, too bad. Even assuming that this is true, let's explore why this doesn't work by means of an analogy. A lot of people have been using the grandfather's watch analogy to argue for this. It essentially goes, my grandfather has his watch stolen in 1910. I, a century later, find the watch, and now I have a claim to it, regardless of who currently owns it. This does not apply here. This is more like someone who claims they are a distant relative of my grandfather, or just looks like my grandfather, or is the same race as my grandfather, claiming that they now own the watch. If someone has direct, provable, familial claims to a plot of land, then yeah, something probably should be done. The current owners should probably be compensated by the government, as this is the burden they assume when they take charge of the country, and then the land should be returned. But this is such a rare case and would require very strong proof, and is not what is happening in the country at present. I will agree that there is a lot of poverty and inequality in South Africa, but this is the responsibility of the government to fix, considering that, regardless of ownership, they are the majority users of farmland and land in general, and unfortunately, the money that should go to the people who need it, or bettering the situation, is instead sent overseas by corrupt officials or used to live a life of luxury, as is, once again, very typical of Africa. Not to mention how badly the Zimbabwe-esque situation is discouraging foreign investment. Myth number 8. White farmers can just leave. Another one I've seen plenty of. People seem to have an image of South African farmers as some sort of wealthy elite that can, if they want to, just fly off and settle somewhere else. The thing is, not only is this ridiculous, it's deliberately dishonest. Firstly, the second another country even talks about taking these farmers in, there is a huge outcry about how this is somehow racist. What is actually desired, it seems, is not just to take the land, but wipe out the farmers. Secondly, these are not millionaires. These are hard-working people who, especially with recent droughts and the like, are not doing especially well themselves. Myth number 9. The country will be better off without whites. There seems to be this weird belief among the far left that the second they get rid of all the evil white people, the country will turn into Wakanda overnight or something. Well, the first thing you have to remember is that there are lots of other minorities in South Africa, and Malema is not exactly a fan of them either. He is also quite vocal about wanting to get rid of Asians and Indians, and amazingly quiet on how he feels about people of mixed race, but you can infer what he wants. Malema wants an ethno-state, stretching from Southern Africa right up to North Africa. It's called Azania. Feel free to Google it. And lastly, never forget how much of South Africa's economy is based on foreign investment and tourism, and nothing is going to scare tourists and foreign investors away like a gigantic genocide of your country's minorities. Number 10. The ANC will block the expropriations. I am seeing a surprising number of people arguing that Malema is just a hothead and that Cyril Ramaphosa and the ANC in general are not going to listen to him. Well, the only reason that they have opposed him in the past was because of his and former President Zuma's animosity towards each other. In fact, currently, Ramaphosa and the ANC are trying to bring him back into the ANC. Keep in mind that this is someone who has openly called for genocide and not only wants to get rid of all whites, but all the other races in the country. Myth number 11. Malema doesn't mean any harm. Never, ever, ever buy into this individual's rhetoric. He does not want to give the land to anyone. He is a hardline communist, and his vision is Azania, a communist, all-black ethnostate stretching across the entirety of Africa, and he seems more than willing to do anything to achieve this. I am still not sure whether he is genuinely crazy or simply another warlord who has found a novel way of achieving his goals, but the results will be the same. He wants South Africa and its wealth for himself and his cronies, and if you think he is going to be giving the land to anyone who actually deserves it, you've got another think coming, as you can clearly see in his interactions with other black people who do not support his politics, or with actual Khoi descendants who want to talk to him about land. This guy is bad news. Finally, myth number 12. There are no farm expropriations coming because they haven't started yet. I keep hearing this, that no expropriations have started yet, and simply because the government have openly stated their goals to do so and have modified the constitution to allow them to do this does not mean they will actually follow through. Well, to this I say, how long do you want to wait? Until they're knocking on doors at night? The Boers are already being targeted and killed in manners that, well, I won't even go into here because I don't want to give the YouTube police another excuse to pull my videos, but it is already happening and the government are letting it happen. The media is mostly dead silent, and any attempt to bring light to the situation or help the farmers is dismissed as racism. So yeah, the next time someone starts running their mouth about this, I hope this video helps. Always keep in mind that this is not just about land. There is a reason that every attempt to help farmers who want to leave do so in peace is being deliberately sabotaged. This is not about redistribution or equality, because this was already happening under the willing buyer, willing seller system, as can clearly be demonstrated by recent stats. This is about revenge against an ethnic minority group because of some stuff that people who share their race did in history. And what is allowing this to happen is simply the silence from the rest of the world. It's Africa, and it's white people being persecuted, so no one cares. At least until the really nasty stuff begins. Spread the word. That's me for the day. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, why not stick around? There's plenty more where this came from. If you want to, you can follow me on Twitter at Starbird_tweets, or if you want to support this channel, you can do so via our Patreon. Cheers, take care. This is Starbird, signing off.
Greetings from the Dark Continent, Conscious Caracal here, and tonight I'm joined by Starbird, and he's someone who's famous for disagreeing with most of what the general populace has to say. So if you could just give the audience a bit of a lowdown, a bit of a summary of who you are and what do you do.
Why, hello, Mr. Carrickle. This is Starbird, and I disagree. I do regular content on a variety of subjects, everything from the situation in South Africa to other social justice issues, generally debunking articles and videos that other people put out. I'm a moderate conservative, and yeah, that's pretty much me in a nutshell. And this
Okay,
is
yes.
Mrs. Bird right here.
Hello.
So, just for transparency's sake, I always like to start off my streams by giving the people an idea of where do you fit in on the political compass. Even though I'm not a big fan of labels, just give me an idea of where you lie on the spectrum.
I'm pretty much a textbook moderate conservative, something of a traditionalist, but I find that saying conservative or liberal is very much a misnomer. There's a lot of things I'm conservative about, and there's some things I'm liberal about. That's why I would say I'm a moderate.
Okay, right. Because I'm pretty much a fiscal conservative. I believe indefinitely you need to have a small government. You can't have bureaucratic overreach. But at the same time, a few years, not even that far back. I mean, 3 years ago, I was a vocal liberal. I mean, I was pretty much far on the left. And then I came to the conclusion that, oh shit, wait, my peers fucking hate me because I'm a straight white male. Then I realized I can't join in conversations anymore. I'm always the butt of the joke. I'm always being fucking denigrated. And they expect me to go along to just preach my white guilt and tell them and just to talk about how ashamed I am of my skin color. And I said, fuck this.
Yeah.
And I started talking to some people that lean more on the right, and I realized, oh shit, wait, these people that I thought were these absolute fucking monsters actually have some pretty nice rational arguments, and they are pretty reasonable.
Yeah, my story is actually quite similar because I was pretty far on the left. I was never quite an SJW. And then I met Mrs. Bird, who's always been a bit of a conservative. And we started talking about things, and she linked me to some videos. We had a lot of really good conversations. And I realized that, getting all your news from CNN is a good way to go totally off track.
That's the thing. I think something that I actually realized a bit too late was the fact that I was only getting all my news about what was happening in the rest of the world from mainstream corporate media. And then when the US election came around, I was pretty much convinced that no, Trump has no chance. Hillary's definitely going to win. And then I started talking to some regular people on the ground. I started talking to some regular Americans over on Twitter. And I realized, oh, wait, this is a completely different scene going on the ground compared to what's being reported in the media. And then I started digging more. And then in January of 2016, I was able to predict that Trump's going to win the election.
Yeah, there we go. And my mute button was on. I'm kind of using it to simulate push to talk. My situation, very similar. We actually, one of our first conversations, the wife and I, was about Hillary and Trump, and she very much kind of explained. There was something called the Hillary Clinton kill list online. What's it called again?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, where it turns out that a huge amount of people who have been in their employ or related to them over the years have overdosed on mouthwash.
Yes, very, very natural, as you do.
It's actually quite scary. But
I just want to clarify to my audience that I'm in perfect health. I'm not suicidal. So if anything happens, after the stream, maybe you should dig a little bit more.
Oh yeah, geez, I'm South Africa terrifies me now.
So on the topic of South Africa, you are planning. Well, I think you already started with your South Africa week. Is that correct?
I think I've got the final video out today. I just released it, and I've got one more sort of bonus video I'll do next week, simply because it's really funny. The situation going on there with the land expropriations is absolute nonsense. I lived in South Africa for most of my life. I grew up all over South Africa, and my parents, about a decade and a half ago, kind of kicked me out of the country. They could kind of see the way the wind was blowing. And I'm kind of glad they did that, because it's really getting bad there now.
So you were basically put into the life raft and set out into the ocean, and you drifted into the west, away from all the turmoil and the chaos of South Africa.
Oh, I've drifted everywhere. I have lived almost everywhere in the world now, doing a variety of things. But I've always, you miss South Africa. I miss the food. I miss the nature. I miss beautiful places like Josini up north,
Mm.
even Zimbabwe, which I've been to. It was beautiful back in my childhood.
Yes, I can
I remember.
completely relate to that idea. I've traveled Europe as well, and I stayed in Germany for 3 months. And the thing that I missed the most was from South Africa was the people. No offense to any Europeans listening, but I found my personal experience of Europeans was they're very cold and metallic. They're not like the South Africans in terms of they're easygoing. It's almost like it's a constant festival going on. People aren't as friendly. You don't really greet someone on the street. For example, in Germany, one of the guys told me if you greet someone on the street that's just a stranger, they suspect you want something from them. So they'll kind of shy away and give you a cold shoulder and start walking faster. And I found that absolutely absurd.
Yeah, people in South Africa are. I think what I've learned is just people are people wherever you go. And I think this is what the far left seems to forget. They insist on making everything about race and doing what I call the grandfather's watch fallacy, which I've explained on my channel a few times. Are you familiar with that?
I'm not. Could you give me a little summary?
Okay, so basically the argument generally goes like this. Like, my grandfather had his watch stolen by someone in 1910. In 2018, I find the watch in the ownership of someone else, and I have a direct claim to that watch. And of course, this is the argument that they kind of follow, that no, someone stole the land or whatever from us, and now we're taking this land back. But in reality, the argument is more like my grandfather had his watch stolen in 1910 by someone with red hair. Down the line, someone with brown hair says, oh, now I have a claim to all watches owned by red-haired people. Because
It's even a bit more sinister than that, man. If you really know your South African history, you'll realize a large portion, even the majority portion of most of these land claims or most of these ownership transfers of land was through trade. There was definitely, if you go to the museums in South Africa, there are actual deals there where you can see transactions between tribe chiefs and Boers while they were trekking up. They made deals for pieces of land. This is documented. This is not some conspiracy or rewriting of history. This is in physical form. I'm actually planning to visit a museum with some of these deals in the near future, so I can actually post some pictures just to show people.
Oh, that'd be great. I would also do a video on that if you did that. That's actually a fantastic idea because, I know that especially initially in the Cape, a lot of the land was purchased from the Khoi. And also what a lot of people don't realize is that the Khoi at this point, they're pretty much the only ones who, if you want to go down that rabbit hole, have any claim to most of the land. They are, at this point in time, mostly mixed race, mostly colored. And a lot of the original Khoi blood now lies in the Cape with the Boers. There's a reason that you get that one or two really dark-skinned kids in every Boer family.
But that's the thing. When you look at South African history, it's much more complex than just a black and white idea of, if you, for example, look at the American history, it's this idea of people just come. A lot of people have this misconception that white people just came to South Africa and kind of caught a bunch of people with traps, with like a box of a slice of pie under it with a rope. And it's not the case. South African history is much more complex than that.
Go for it, love.
But I was going to say that if it was in the States, they'd probably have some sort of racist picture where it's like watermelon or like fried chicken under the box.
She's African. She's allowed to say it.
I actually find this whole like Zania Pan-African country extremely offensive. As someone with very strong African ties, the idea that another tribe should come and tell my tribe what to do is insane. Like, I would never listen to some other tribe coming over and saying, "Oh yes, we're all the same." I'm like, no, we're not.
No, they're not.
That's an interesting point you bring up. That's a misconception that a lot of people have with South Africa. They have this misconception that I get from a lot of foreigners that South Africa is just black and white. There's going to be the civil war, black versus white. It's going to be a racial thing. And then they don't realize that South Africa is not just this black and white country. If you look at the black South Africans, there's a lot of diversity in terms of culture there as well. They're not going to just work together against a common foe. They're going to fight each other as well if a war breaks out over, for example, a resource like land. They're not just going to. They're not just one homogenous agreeing collective, if you can put it that way.
Well, that's why you have 11 official languages. It's not just English and Zulu. You've got like another 9.
Yeah, Afrikaans,
Yes, exactly.
Setswana, Sindebele, all the ones. Yeah,
most of them are
Exactly.
unique to each tribe, and there's a reason they didn't agree to just one official language. It's because it's part of who they are, that they speak their own language, they have their own customs, that they're recognized officially as their own distinct group. Like, even if you created some new Pan-Africa tribe called the Xenia, which was just all tribes, good luck agreeing to that.
No, yeah,
like
you
you
only
would-
have to
you
have,
would
yeah, you
never-
only have to have a conversation. You only have to have a conversation with a Xhosa or a Zulu about the other side or about the other tribe, and you'll realize, oh shit, wait, these people despise each other as well.
You could look at just about any country in Africa that won its independence in the last maybe 50 years and see how quickly things degenerate. Like Sudan, which we now have 2 Sudans.
the Congo.
Which I don't even like. I'm not sure we can even call Congo a country right now. It's just a mess.
So here's an interesting thing. Here's the population density map of South Africa in terms of where all the black South Africans live. And if you look down there in the bottom left corner, that's where Cape Town is. That's where the first white settlers arrived. Now, just take this in, and then you realize that it's not just they found this entire inhabited country. It's much more complex than that.
You know, I did an analysis of this, and it turns out that the farms in the Cape, even when they are offered under willing by a willing seller to people, nobody wants them. What they want is the farms in KwaZulu-Natal and the Limpopo, the more verdant regions. And you can see on your map quite clearly where those areas are. They're the fertile areas. And those areas are now ranging from 51 to almost 80% black-owned farms. So this idea of, the whites own all the farmland is complete rubbish.
And for example, if you also look at that, for argument's sake, let's say that stat is true, that 72% of the country's land is in white ownership, which is provably false. But for example, let's just go with that stat. Now look at the left here. Let's take that Northern Cape, which is that big slice at the top left of the country. You take the Western Cape, which is there at the bottom left. And if you take that entire almost like beige block there, that's almost half of the country where there's absolutely no big density populations of black South Africans. So
there's no real big density populations of anyone really. That's mostly
the desert,
the Badlands.
Yeah. So for example, if you look at the Northern Cape, that big chunk at the top left, those are mostly sheep farmers. So at the same time, some farmer there, some white farmer owns incredible amount of land, but at the same time he needs that amount of land for his sheep farm because nobody else wants it. Nobody wants to live there. So it's a bit of I know what they're doing. It's a skewing of the facts.
Is also they've been quite tricky because, well, a lot of their stats come from a 1994 census. And that's about 30 years ago now almost. Yeah, and it's tremendously out of date. If you look at stats since then, things have shifted dramatically. The only areas which are still similar are, the Cape, and that's because nobody is wanting to take that land besides the farmers. And what they've also done is they've included some of the large swaths of land that are owned by foreign investors that the government uses as white-owned property. The government is the majority user of all the land in South Africa.
Yes. And another thing that people don't realize is a lot of the land is in the ownership of trusts. And for example, KwaZulu-Natal, which is almost completely under the control of the Zulu King Zwelithini.
Yeah. KZN is rough now.
Well, I I made a thread on Twitter the other day just to, a while ago to show people that to convey this idea that if strong emphasis on if a civil war breaks out in South Africa, it will not be divided along racial lines, it will be along cultural lines. If you look at, for example, the motion that just passed, or the motion that's being proposed about land expropriation, there's a lot of pushback from Zulus, especially because that means their chiefs are going to have to give up their land as well to the state, and they're not going to have that.
Well, this is the whole thing. People have really been sucked in by the EFF. They don't realize that this is not a simple matter of taking land from the whites and giving it to the old owners. This is a land of taking all the land and nationalizing it. Are you familiar with the Azania movement?
Yeah, I'm pretty much familiar, but I don't take them very seriously.
This is what EFF kind of want, is this Azania. There's a lot of it going on in other countries now too. The idea is a communist, hardline communist, ethno-state stretching from South Africa right up to the north. And they have this image of
Wakanda.
Africa just being, I guess, black people. Yeah, Wakanda. But
the funny thing about Wakanda is that it's an extreme conservative, isolationist.
It's an isolationist ethno state with a high-tech wall. It's basically an alt-right's wet dream.
Yeah, I'm actually a huge Black Panther fan.
But the thing is, again, Wakanda is the portrayal of it is extremely unlikely. Any state that has such bitter divisions between tribes would never be able to cooperate long enough to get to that level of technology and civilization. And you see in the movie, they kind of brush over it quietly, that one tribe actually dominated all of the other tribes and became ruler.
Exiled.
And this touches back on something I mentioned earlier, is the fact that if you look at Europe, the EU is failing because the European countries have been feuding for thousands of years. They could never work together. But now people have this misconception that no, Africa is going to be different. African cultures and African countries can work together as one homogenous agreeing mass.
Oh yeah, I hear all sorts of things on, like, I've seen my husband's YouTube comments, and a lot of people seem to be under the impression that war is a white based
invention,
conflict, that black people wouldn't fight unless there were white people instigating somehow, and that as soon as we get rid of white people, like, there'll just be peace.
Close the door 1 second.
It's very similar to how I think a lot of people talk about if women ruled the world, there would be no war. And so they say if blacks ruled the world, there would be no war.
Yeah, because I kind of agree. If women ruled the world, there wouldn't be any war. There'd just be a bunch of countries not talking to each other.
You know what country has the right idea? Hungary.
Elaborate?
Their thing is actually, my mother's Hungarian. Sorry to everyone who thinks I'm not black enough now. But with Hungary, they have actually a fairly straightforward immigration and citizenship process, which is move to the country, buy like some shares of the economy, however you want to do that, and pass a test in the language.
Yeah.
And you can be a citizen. Like, it's like a 90-day turnaround. They don't care where you're from. They don't care about any of that. Prove you can speak our language and you have a reason to be in the country.
Yeah. You want to assimilate.
Yeah, they're very much against, well, they have their own wall right now.
Yeah, well, their wall is basically, if you cross the border, bang.
Well,
that's what I'm seeing, is that countries like Hungary and Poland are actually taking their border security quite seriously. Like, they're saying, no, we're going to keep uncontrolled immigration at bay. And that's kind of where I stand as well. I'm not anti-immigration. I'm pretty much in support of merit-based immigration. I just think that you need to do it legally. Unregulated illegal immigration destroys your country. Like, it's not good for crime rates. Just look at South Africa. I can speak out of personal experience.
Whoa, boy. Yeah, we used to go hunting and fishing up north. Do you know Josini?
Yes, I do.
It's a beautiful place there, magic. And that place used to be, you could go out there, you camp, and you are about 20, 30 kilometers away from the nearest civilization. Now you can't go there because you've got refugees from Zimbabwe and bandits streaming over the border. You know, my dad was driving up in that region, and they started pushing burning tires down onto the road, trying to block his car. And this is South Africa. This is supposed to be a first world country.
No, it's not.
And you got fucking bandits.
It's
I
like
think
the Wild West.
It wasn't that second.
Second world.
It's like most like pushing towards first world.
Yeah, because here's the interesting thing about South Africa is it's a kind of a country of pockets. You find these pockets of first world. You can find first class experiences almost everywhere. But at the same time, then you also have these pockets of absolute just poverty, and where you basically live in the most abject poverty and crime. And
It's a lot like Mexico.
Yeah, you know, it's the thing about those areas is they're spreading. When I returned home a bit back, one of the areas where I used to live, it used to be kind of a built-up area like a city, and then kind of wildlands, and then a squatter camp or an informal settlement. And in the 7 years since I had last visited, that informal settlement had spread up until it was basically nose to nose with the urban area. And yeah, geez, I was nearly mugged twice just being home.
Yeah, and here's the interesting thing. Last December, I was talking to a Malawian who immigrated to South Africa legally. And he told me that the biggest supporters of immigration control in South Africa are actually the foreigners that came here legally. Because they don't want they went through all this trouble to go through the processes, to go through the motions and all the admin and all the waiting. And now some guy that climbed in the back of a van or swam through a river just bypasses all of that and comes here and takes their job. And I can relate to that. I can completely understand.
You know, we've said this several times that illegal immigrants tend towards conservative, especially in terms of immigration, because it is a nightmare.
It's expensive, it's bureaucratic.
It takes ages, you can't work. It's
also petty, there's a lot of things seem to be at the whim of whichever officer is looking at your case that day. Are they in a bad mood? Did they have their coffee? Like, so much of it is the whims of government and small people with a lot of power exercising it whenever they feel like it.
And this is what legal immigrants have to go through. On the other hand, they're letting in these, not even refugees, economic migrants.
Whoever can spin the saddest sob story in 5 minutes.
You had that hilarious case where the so-called, was it a 12-year-old boy?
Oh yeah, the 12-year-old boy who turned out to be a mid-40s man who got adopted by this bleeding heart in the UK. And then this, open quotes, 12-year-old boy shows up, and he's a grown man. And he sexually assaults her and all sorts of stuff. Like,
Jesus.
Yeah.
I'm like, yes, this man with a full beard and gray hair is a 12-year-old boy who hasn't gone through puberty. I definitely believe you.
Europe is, oh my word, most of Europe is dead. I would never go there.
But talking about South African history, I'm currently reading Path of Blood by Peter Becker. And it's a story of Mzilikazi, and it's absolutely engrossing. I'll just give you the summary at the back of the book, just to give you an idea. It's captivating me at the moment. So they call him the bull elephant, the king of black kings, the founder of the mighty Mtabeli Empire. In his rise to power, he completely exterminated 28 tribes, pillaged 500,000 square miles of Africa, ruthlessly took girls for his harems and men for his army, leaving the corpses of the slain in smoking ruins to be devoured by hungry lions and leopards. And his name was Mzilikazi. And this book here basically gives the full, vivid, and fascinating story of one of the most savage tyrants who ever cast a shadow across the bloodstained history of Africa. The most dreaded warrior since Attila's horde swept across the plains of Europe. And this was something people need to understand, that Africa wasn't this harmonious place up until the white man just stumbled upon it. Just like the rest of the world thousands of years ago, it was pretty much gripped in conflict. Tribal conflict, and it was not a nice place. It was basically what you were seeing at the time across the world. People were just fighting each other for any bit of resource. It was a dog-eat-dog world, and people kind of creating this romanticized idea of it, I think, is a bit unfair, and it dehumanizes Africans. It creates this idea that no, you can't be flawed. You can't be to err is human, but you can't err, so you're basically just my pet. That's what I get from a lot of people on the left wing, is they view black people as their pets, as their little pet projects. And I refuse to do that. The fact is, I talk to my fellow black friends as my fellow peers. If they make a mistake, I will criticize them, but they can also criticize me when I make a mistake. That's what you do. That's how you treat your equals.
Well, this is the far left. I've actually got a video that I will make down the line. It's like the 10 reasons why I'm glad to be a conservative now, in that the left, in their own very insidious, very sneaky way, are incredibly racist and incredibly sexist, because they want these special provisions and special laws and special measures for women and black people. And the core message they have is that these people are not our equal, and thus they need a leg up.
Yes,
And
it's basically that's why I find what you call it, the
affirmative action
quotas. Yeah, like quotas. It's so patronizing. The idea of like, no, don't worry, you can't compete with white people. We're going to give you we're going to have to give you a handicap. And I mean, what the fuck, man? That's so dehumanizing. That's so patronizing. Telling someone that you can't compete on a level playing field, you're going to need special help.
Yeah, Jesus, you see it everywhere now. Like, universities are so screwed. I was reading an article a while back about some university where the girls at the university were such a majority that they were complaining bitterly because the few boys on campus basically had their pick. This is what happens.
Well, I think this is one of the reasons why like MGTOW and things like that have had such a strong grip, is there's been decades and decades and decades of I guess we could call them educators. I don't know how much respect you want to give to them, but people in authority saying, oh, these poor women, yeah, they're equal this, equal that, but we got to give them this handicap. We got to have all these scholarships for them because you are going to be bullied and disenfranchised and no one's going to give you a fair chance. And the men you work with are always going to look at you as a piece of sexual property and they're never going to respect your mind and all of this. And by the time you get to now, you've had several generations of women being told, no man's going to respect you. No one's going to look and see what you can do. They're always going to just look and see, breasts and baby making factory. Like, they're not going to ever give you a fair shake. And you have one generation, like now going back to like grandmother's generation, of mothers and daughters being told this and telling their kids, and it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger until there's no chance that they'll ever see the world as giving them an equal opportunity. It's learned helplessness.
Yeah,
and then men wonder, where did the women go? It's like,
yeah. But I think we're seeing the same thing in South Africa as well, with the right and the left in terms of the races too. So you see, for example, you get this narrative from the far left telling black people in South Africa that no, all your white peers wake up every morning thinking, how can I keep the black man down today? Then you have the far right telling their constituents basically that no, all black people wake up in the morning thinking, how can I murder some whites today? And that just drives people farther apart. It consumes the center, basically.
Yes, this is exactly what's happened. This is something I call ideological drift. And it's basically, this is why you've seen such a rise of, I suppose you would say, the alt-right. The
polarization.
Right, these, I suppose you would say, neo-arch-conservatives, hardline nationalists, because this is what happens is it kind of creates a tribal mindset where people are going, well, the center's gone. So either I go to the left or the right. And they start flocking to people like Richard Spencer because they feel like they're under attack. And we're considering very strongly.
For example, the far left will go to, well, that's basically how polarization works throughout history, is that a center builds up, the center grows, and then hard times hit or destabilization happens. And then, for example, the far left goes and they go to the center and they point to the far right and they say, look at all these Nazis. Look at all these white supremacists. They want to kill you. Come to our side. We'll keep you safe. Then you go to the right, and they do exactly the same. They go to the center. Far right goes to the center, and they start talking to them. So look at all these Antifa. Look at all these Marxists on the left. They want to kill you. Come to our side. We'll keep you safe. And that's how society polarizes. And that's what we're seeing at the moment, is that the center is shrinking. Both sides are cannibalizing the center.
I think that I've actually covered a lot of Antifa. I guess that was kind of when my channel started growing, was when I did the Antifa coverage. Antifa represents something very, very strange to me. It's this kind of resurgence of communism. And I don't know where this came from. If you looked at a guy called, what's his name? Yuri Bezmenov.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with Yuri?
No,
Yuri
I'm not. Give me a little lowdown.
Absolutely fascinating chap. He talks about something called ideological infiltration. And basically the way it works is rather than, just propagandizing things, you quite sneakily introduce, well, you first of all, you disenfranchise people and you remove their faith in their own country, their religions, and you kind of remove their identity. And then you introduce another identity, in this case, communist thought. And it's got various stages. And the stages basically progress to a point where they no longer need to do everything because the population that has been ideologically infiltrated will continue to do it to themselves. And he talks about how this has actually happened in the West through schooling, where schooling teaches people nothing but what is the bad things your country did? What is the bad things your religion did? Oh, by the way, here's another foreign idea that is different. And it perpetuates itself. And I think this is what's happened to Western society by, I guess, removing Western religions, removing a lot of patriotism from these countries. They've created a void that other things have come in to fill. And this is why you've seen such a rise of, I guess, Islam and fucking communism.
Yes, no, definitely, man. But the other thing is, I do think I agree with your connection with disenfranchisement. This idea of, I myself am a millennial. I'm pretty much in my mid-20s right now, and the thing is, we do have a problem with identity. People in my generation are looking for an in-group. They are looking for a tribe to join, and all these groups, like for example Antifa or even the alt-right, give them that. They give them that family, that group that they can join, a tribe that will keep them safe, that will protect them, that will help them find their way in the world and give them some meaning in their life. And that's what these types of groups are preying on. That's that's the type of thing that they're exploiting. Is the fact that a lot of people in the millennial generation do not have a tribe or an identity or something that they can hold on to or something to give them meaning.
This is why I'm sad to see things. When I'm a lot older than you are. When I was growing up, I was part of, I guess, my church and the Boy Scouts and groups like that. And that kind of gave me a center. Oh, 1 second. When you talk about people like Antifa, are you familiar with the term NEET? NEET?
Yes, in Japanese culture.
No, that's a hikikomori. That's a little different. NEET refers to what's it? No.
Not in education,
employment or training.
Yeah.
It's basically the trend now where young people live at home until they're almost in their 30s. And there was a study in the UK that showed most of these Antifa are these chaps, and they're basically LARPing. They've been sold this weird mindset where they are fucking Dumbledore's army from Harry Potter fighting the Death Eaters, or the Inglorious. You laugh if you want to look at the way they actually talk.
I laugh because I've seen this. I've seen this in real time unfolding.
Yeah, and this is the scary thing. I mean, Lauren Southern talked about this when she was back on The Rebel, and she absolutely nailed it. Anyways, going back, you wanted to talk about Vicky Momberg and what happened there.
Yes, that's actually a pretty big development in South African politics. This happened in the past week. So just to give people a very quick summary, Vicky Momberg, I think it was 2016, was the victim of a smash and grab, where they basically smash your window and grab anything they can, the criminals, and then they run off. And then she was caught on camera where she's racially abusing a policeman, and basically so in South Africa, we have a word that is basically the same weight, even more than the N word in America. It's the K word in South Africa. I'm not going to use it so I don't get flagged or maybe get sent to jail. So basically what happens is that she racially abuses this policeman and goes on a complete racist tirade. I mean, she's definitely a fucking scummy person. But then someone captures this on camera, and she goes to court, and she gets sentenced to 3 years in prison for what's the term, inferior, something like that, for
Oh, it's
attacking
called
this
crimen injuria.
yes,
It's
for
basically a
damaging,
hate
for
speech
attacking
law.
this person's dignity.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I have a pretty strong opinion on this. Firstly, I don't want to see anyone, no matter who it is, sent to jail for speech, for language, unless they were inciting violence or a direct call to action. Otherwise, I don't want to see anyone go to jail for anything they said. And this sets a very dangerous precedent, especially in South Africa, because we have a very evident double standard when it comes to racism. In
Oh,
South
yes.
Africa, the idea that black people can't be racist is pretty popular, and you'll see if you've been following, if you're in South Africa and you're following the stream, you'll know that if a person is racist in South Africa towards a black person, their name gets printed on every newspaper. They become famous in the worst possible way, and they have basically have a hate mob go after them. But if you see people, and there was a case like this last year or in 2016 of a guy wearing a shirt at his university that said "Kill all whites," and nothing happened to him. He didn't go to jail. He didn't get even appear in court. He was hailed as a progressive hero. So
Oh,
at the same
yes.
time, that's what I said in my when I featured on Adam and his Apples video on the topic, was that if we want to go down this path, now I don't want to have laws that jail people for their speech, but if we go down this path, it needs to be consistent. If there's not consistency, then this is basically an anti-white law. Then this is a law that specifically targets a group of people, a group in society, and is only going to be used against that group. And I think that is definitely unconstitutional, and it should not be tolerated in a first world country or even in any country. Do you have any thoughts on it, Starbird?
Yes, yes, yes. No, this reminds me a lot of. Sorry, I'm trying to find my thing again here. Are you familiar with the case of Ntokozo Kwabe? This was
Yes.
yes,
Maybe
this was
just
the
give a
famous.
summary for the audience.
This was the famous chap that he and his friend went to a restaurant and they ate a bunch of stuff and then they verbally abused the white waitress. They were saying things that, like, we're not going to tip you until you return our land. And then she burst into tears eventually, and then he posted on Facebook about this, saying, these glorious white tears and the like. She eventually got some money from other people, like crowdfunding, but his university, which is actually Oxford in England, basically said that no, it's absolutely fine what he said. And later on, this guy came back and was heavily involved in the Rhodes Must Fall movement, and he attacked some white guy with a freaking sjambok. And once again, this was perfectly acceptable. No penalties were leveled against him. This business of crimen injuria, I'm not a fan of it. It's much like the N-word controversy in America. If you really, really want to criminalize speech, A, it's a stupid idea, because context is everything, and B, you're never going to apply it universally because it relies on an idea that certain people need to be protected from speech. It's a very racist idea. It's a very outdated idea. This Vicky Momberg case is ludicrous, and I mean, even some people in freaking ANC are saying this is ludicrous. This is not about any kind of justice. It's about revenge, and this is much like the whole land expropriation thing, which is again very much about revenge, which is the same. It's the reason that every country that has tried to offer to take the Boers has met with such pushback, saying, no, 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 you're racist, because it's not really about land redistribution. It's about the age-old African tradition of find a tribe that no one likes, blame them for all of your country's ills, wipe them out, and then use that momentum to wipe out a bunch of other people and seize power.
Yes,
And I
exactly.
think,
And an interesting phenomenon that I've seen in my personal life in South Africa is the fact that colored and Indian South Africans are waking up to the fact that it's not going to end with white people. This racial hierarchy or this oppression Olympics is not going to end with just one group. When, for
Interrupt you
example,
for a second.
yes, go for it.
For my viewers, coloured is a term in South Africa that refers to people of mixed race. It's
Mixed
not
race
a
and
slur.
Khoisan heritage,
Yes.
and also Malay.
Yes. Well,
So it's
Malay is
literally,
a lot of
to put it very simply, it's basically light brown skinned South Africans. And at the same time, they can't be more different from the African cultures in South Africa. I mean, they are a culture and an ethnicity on their own. On any government form, when you identify your race, colored is an official race. They self-identify as colored. They speak Afrikaans. And also, if you go up to a colored person in South Africa and you call him black or you call him African, he's going to laugh. Firstly, he's going to laugh at you. And secondly, he's going to insult you in very colorful Afrikaans.
Yeah, it's probably going to nut you one. I mean, some of my best mates in university were colored chaps, and yeah, they very, very different culture, very different language. South Africa is incredibly diverse, and this is what people don't understand. It's not just even black and white. It's not just tribes. You've got a lot of Greeks there, very strong Greek communities.
And
Portugal, lots of Portuguese. You've got a few Asians. You've got Arabs. You've got various Indian groups. The Indians are, to be honest, probably the most isolationist. Driving
interesting fact for the audience: Durban on the east coast of South Africa is called Little India because it's the city that has the biggest Indian population outside of India itself. And best curry in the world. I can highly recommend it. Definitely go there.
I strongly disagree.
Also,
honestly,
I'm a big fan of Durban. I mean, I grew up in the Western Cape, and Durban, well, South Africa is the world in a country, I always say. And visiting Durban is like visiting another country. It is an absolutely incredible place. KZN in general is beautiful. If you go to the Drakensberg Mountains, I mean, I'm a photographer. So if you want to have some nice landscape imagery, go no further than the Drakensberg range.
The Drakensberg is beautiful.
And the people are also incredibly interesting. For example, it's a complete culture shock coming from Cape Town to Durban. It's, like I said, a completely different country within a country.
Oh, yeah. Well, South Africa is quite diverse. Speaking of the Indians, you say the curry's good. It's actually quite interesting because my wife's mother, who is Hungarian, cooked me some Hungarian curry, or some of her curry, goat curry.
No, it's Nigerian curry.
It's Nigerian curry, yes. And it's the West Indies curry. When I left South Africa and ate at other Indian restaurants, the curry is totally different. It's more the proper Indian curry with naan rather than rice or pompadums. It's more of a sweet curry than a spicy curry, and it's nice stuff. Durban is different. Durban, you can go from one street and it being beautiful and clean and safe to another street where you might not come out.
Yeah.
Durban's rough. KZN is rough now, especially out of the kind of gated community. Like, everyone's now in gated communities, and if you're not, you're going to have problems.
Exactly. But at the same time, that's the thing about South Africa. And I always tell foreigners, if they want to come to South Africa on a holiday, if you just exercise a bit of self-awareness and just the awareness of your surroundings, you'll be fine. The people that are the victims, the tourists that are the victims of crime in South Africa are usually the naive ones that just walk into bad neighborhoods or don't really pay attention to what's going on around them. I mean, if you just exercise a little bit of awareness about what's going on around you, you'll be pretty much fine.
Yeah.
It's different in other parts of Africa.
Yeah.
My friend who's from Ghana went home because I think someone had a baby and they wanted to do a family reunion and introduce everyone to the new baby. And of course, that kind of information gets out in these sort of small communities that there's people coming home. There's going to be a lot of people with valuable possessions and stuff because there's a party. And sure enough, they have their family reunion. And people with semi-automatic weapons come in and they start shooting up the place, kill a bunch of people, steal everything, kill all their guard dogs and everything. And of course, it's the neighbors. It's their own neighbors in that situation who are doing some of this. Like, you go to some of these places in Africa, it's not foreigners who often have trouble, because the tourists will attract like international attention if you go after a tourist usually, unless they're really someplace they're not supposed to be. If you're a local coming in from out of town, all bets are off. You have to be so careful. Like, there are places that you just don't go.
Well, this is Zimbabwe now. You know, I actually had some mates that wanted to go up and see Victoria Falls, and they had to go by helicopter because the roads are simply not safe now for anyone. And this is what concerns me, is I really do not want to see South Africa go this way, because, you know, South Africa is amazing. It's such a great country. It's got so much beauty, so much great food, you know, cultures and history going back hundreds, if not thousands of years. And watching it now all kind of fall apart it's very saddening.
Yes, exactly. But at the same time, to get back to the idea of criminalizing racism, there's the popular idea in South Africa, well, across the world, basically, in terms of black people can't be racist. It's that idea of racism is privilege plus power, or what's it?
It's
There's the sociology definition of racism that people like to throw around, but it can't be farther from the truth, because the very history of racism is that if you look at as a matter of historical fact, it's not true that racial minorities perceived as privileged and powerful cannot be the victims of racism. If you look at the history of the word racist, and this is what I brought up in Adam and his Apples video, and I uploaded that clip on my channel as well, is that the word's first use it originated as when it was first commonly used in the English language to describe precisely this type of racial persecution that we saw from the Nazis towards the Jews. They saw the Jews as a minority that were controlling the country's financial and economic powers, basically. And the argument that you're seeing from the left at the moment, that you can't be racist if you're not in a position of power, is absolutely absurd, and it mirrors that exact logic that we saw in Nazi Germany.
Well, the scariest thing about it is even that definition is now shifting, because a lot of the time it's like, well, now you are in a position of power, so can you be racist? Like, no. Now it requires power plus privilege plus historical power plus privilege. So this definition changes to whatever is convenient. But speaking of Germany, there's a very disturbing parallel in South Africa right now. If you dig into the EFF's actual plans, which is not simply an empire, their plans for the people they don't like isn't deportation. It's to put them in camps. And this is... people don't know the history. Like, how can you not see the parallels here? You are taking your racial minorities, who you blame for economic woes, taking their land and putting them in ghettos and camps.
Yeah, exactly. And if you want to really see that at play, you just have to look at this quote that I put in my video as well. Joseph Goebbels, the absolute meister of propaganda, and I quote, said, "The Jews living in Germany, in view of the small percentage they represent of the entire population, have held such an enormously large number of powerful posts in the life of the nation that the Germanic element seemed almost completely excluded from leading positions." Now, as I said in my video, just change one or two words in that quote, and it's pretty much you're left with a clip from a EFF speech.
Yeah, I did a chap today called King Noble. And if you really want to see how this alt-left thinks, this guy is ground zero. There's others called like Nicole's Views and Cynthia G, if you're familiar with them, are very much ground zero. And it's such a weird way of thinking, because on one hand, they are saying, well, all black people, they have this image that, and I'm not even joking here, that only black people are really human. And
the melanin.
Not just the melanin, it's they've got this weird thing about how white people are kind of Neanderthals, and
that's not true though.
Black people are different species. It's a really strange and warped viewpoint.
We're all Homo sapiens.
Yeah.
Like...
And this is, I don't know. It's stuff that really saddens me.
And that's the strange thing, and that's also the absurd thing, is that people with these types of views are celebrated in society and not condemned. They're not being ashamed, basically. People hear them talking about how white people are basically mutations or not even human, and they just either celebrate them or just ignore them as, no, this doesn't represent a large portion of society. But then, in my own personal experience, I've come across people that hold these views, and they are completely convinced that white people are this non-human alien race or mutated race that kind of have a tendency for violence and war and oppression. And this is not present in black society or in a black person's mind or psyche. And this is not some fringe view. I've met a lot of people with this view, and I've seen a lot of pretty high-profile people parrot this.
Oh yes. If you really, sorry, Lev, over to you.
Oh yeah, I was just saying that I think some of this comes from a change in the sciences. I've always loved science and in all of its forms, but in the last probably 2 decades, there's been quite a concerning change that I've noticed in the scientific community, a sort of dishonesty that has spread throughout scientific papers and stuff. Probably a lot of people are familiar with the guy who came up with vaccines give you autism. These sort of very high profile, very damaging articles. And even though he's had to pay damages and he's been completely discredited in the scientific community, like still people will say that vaccines give you autism, which isn't to say that some places the government is trustworthy when it comes to vaccinations. But by and large, we exterminated, what was it, measles?
Yeah.
And then we brought it back because people were like, oh no,
yeah.
Autism, which is a genetic...
Here's the thing, and it's going a bit off topic, but it's a very interesting idea. Why people are attracted to conspiracy.
There's an old phrase which is, a lie can go around the world before the truth even has its boots on.
Yes, exactly. And even though it goes a bit off topic, I think it's an interesting idea, the idea of conspiracy theories, why people like conspiracy theories and why they have this tendency to spread. And it's because people have this innate need to have secret knowledge. We want the edge on our peers. You want to know something that gives us the edge that other people don't know. And that's why a lot of these conspiracy theories get all this traction, is because people have this innate need to have this access to secret knowledge that other people don't know, because that's how we evolve. That's basically how humans are hardwired.
Well, I think why it's so popular right now is because it's a shortcut to true knowledge. Because if you really wanted to know something that other people don't know, you can do research, primary research, go and discover something for yourself.
Oh, that's dead.
Go and look through I don't know how many papers and come up with some new theory, decide for yourself.
Well, journalism's dead as well.
Oh,
yeah, but that's the thing. That's
not even journalism now.
That type of knowledge. That type of knowledge that you can go read up on, that's pretty much common knowledge. That's what anyone in the general populace can go read on. So it's not as enticing. It's not secret knowledge. I don't mean just
information. I mean actually, because in science, you can't just read one paper and have a theory based off of one paper. That's not a true hypothesis. That's not a true theory. It has to be tested over and over and over again in all sorts of different permutations and all sorts of conditions for you to actually get to the truth. I think what a lot of science and a lot of different areas like journalism have lost is not just testing the confirmation bias, testing to see if I'm right, but testing to see if you're wrong. Oh, yeah. So not just finding a fact somewhere in one thing, in one source and saying, here's the truth, but going and seeing who is saying that this is not the truth. What are they saying? How does this truth actually break down?
Well, science is dying out now. I mean, there's the whole movement, which is, the scientific method and, being objective is actually racist and sexist. And I'm actually going to cover some articles on this eventually.
Yeah, my microscope is a phallus. It's a phallic device. And I have internalized misogyny because I use a microscope.
Are you familiar with the paper? Sorry, getting a little topic here. The conceptual penis. Have you heard of this one?
Yes, the satirical paper. Yes.
This was funny. This was very, very funny. And the problem is,
It's not in a peer-reviewed journal.
Yeah, and it's not the craziest thing I've read either.
But here's the thing. One of my favorite scientific philosophers, Karl Popper, said, "The fool claims to possess the truth. The man of science simply pursues it." And I'm definitely going to make a video on that. I'm going to make a video on what is true science and what is pseudoscience. Because the difference is, to give you a very short summary, you're pretty much familiar, but for the people listening, pseudoscience is science and theories that can't be proved wrong. They don't give you any requirements on how they can be refuted. Now, for example, the theory of gravity can be easily refuted if you can give me an example of where the laws of gravity do not apply. It states its own criteria for refutation. But if you look, for example, to a theory like the communist utopia, and every time a communist state fails, they only say, "No, that wasn't real communism," the no true Scotsman fallacy. They don't give you any criteria for the refutation of communism or for that theory, and that makes it pretty much pseudoscience. It doesn't have it doesn't tell you, okay, if you give me this, if you can give me examples of X, Y, and Z, then I will concede that my theory is false. They just create more ad hoc explanations on why your refutation is not true.
Oh, or they go on because I spend a lot of time arguing with people on social media, and it's always, this is what I believe. Go and educate yourself.
Yes.
Oh boy, that little phrase makes me want to punch the internet.
Yes, I always tell people, don't believe what I say, research what I say.
Yeah, I see this as well. This is why I enjoy the kind of back and forth. I mean, I had a chap recently called the Bard of the American Redoubt, and he actually made a counter video to mine. He's a really smart chap, and we were talking about this, and he's like, it's nice to be able to talk civilly with people when you don't agree with them. And this is something that's been lost now. The far left has totally lost this ability to be disagreed with and to engage in debate. There actually was I think it was it BuzzFeed, or it was one of these people who talked about debate. We place too much value on discussion and debate. And I'm like, the second you say that, you lose all credibility.
We are all a hive mind in perfect harmony and agreement with each other.
Oh, speaking of this hive mind, this has been the new thing, which is gaming. And I'm a huge gamer. I've been gaming since I was a wee lad.
Insane.
Yeah. Well, since you were a wee girl, I guess.
I wouldn't be a wee lad, yeah. Not that kind of relationship.
But there's recently been this huge movement against... it started with Gamergate, and then it moved on to, well, recently was Cuphead, which is a very difficult game. And it was, Cuphead is biased. Cuphead is prejudiced because it is a meritocratic game that emphasizes personal skill. And there was an article recently that Ian Miles Chong put out, which is very good, talking about how gaming and this movie Ready Player One is bad because it emphasizes skill and excellence rather than collective achievement. And I'm like, when did this collectivism stuff come creeping back in? Because it's so damaging.
I guess that's why there's no more single-player games.
Yeah,
You haven't won unless everyone wins with you.
Ugh.
Meritocracy is a tool of white supremacy.
Yes. Oh yeah, this was another article that was out a while back. And you see it a lot, this weird communist streak that has become so prevalent in so many far lefts. And I suppose you call it intersectionality as well, which is everything is connected, all people are connected, and everyone has to fight for everything equally.
Yeah, they basically want to give everyone a participation trophy. There's no room for personal excellence or basically a hierarchy of skill. Everyone needs to be able to win. You need to be able to hold people's hands so everyone crosses the finish line.
Yes, and this is what really bothers me.
Well, no, it's not even that, because it's not so much that everyone crosses the finish line, it's that you don't want there to be a difference between the first person who crosses and the last person who crosses.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
You want to eliminate effort, essentially, and you want to eliminate excellence. The Japanese have a saying that you can say it a bunch of different ways, but basically the nail that sticks up highest is hammered down first.
Yeah,
And the idea
it's the
is
tall
that
poppy
you
syndrome.
should always be average.
Yeah.
Neither above nor below your peers.
Yeah.
That you should never stick out either by excellence or by failure.
Yeah, Japan is a very interesting counterexample of why an ethno-state doesn't work either. Because, I've been to Japan, and Japan it's a beautiful country.
Lovely to visit.
Lovely to visit, incredible history, and it's dead. The country is dead. The country is, its population growth rate is so far below the replacement rate that, you won't, in a small town, you won't find people between the age of 18 and 50, and a full school will have like 4 students.
Yeah.
This is the other side of the coin.
It's called tall poppy syndrome, where the tall poppy gets cut down by the lawnmower. And basically, they want everyone on an equal footing. That's the end goal of communism, basically, is everyone is equally poor. Then there's perfect equality. Yeah.
Well, that's communism in a nutshell. Anything held in common will be mistreated.
Including being tall, apparently, for some reason. We all have to be equal heights. Being tall is privilege.
Oh boy, there was this recent video. This was the queer kids video that's kind of done the rounds.
I'm waiting for them to go to the Miss America or whatever and start slicing people because beauty is a privilege. Not because these women exercise every day and eat healthy and take care of their skin and put on sunscreen and stuff and all of that. No. It's a privilege that they don't deserve, and we're going to take it away because not everyone can have it.
And that is the
fact that you're attracted to someone because they're healthy looking or because of their certain physical features is all just a social construct. It couldn't possibly be connected to your actual evolutionary reasons for why you are attracted to certain features. Can't possibly.
Yeah, I'm waiting for them to do this with cats and dogs and start saying that the reason that animals mate is not because they have this one's bigger and stronger and a better mate. It's just, it's a social construct. If we didn't have humans around polluting the animal world, everyone would eat everyone.
We're there. Just look at people like Riley Dennis, who insist that if you don't want to sleep with a tranny, you are an evil homophobe. And I'm like, no, I just don't really like dicks.
That's the thing. And so I just want to say thank you very much for coming on, Starbird, and your significant other, your other half. This has been an incredibly interesting stream and discussion, and I'm definitely going to have you on for a future one. I hope this inspires you to do your own streams in the future, and I definitely be keen to come on and give my 2 cents and throw my hat in the ring. And I'd just like to ask, do you have any final thoughts? And afterwards, you can just plug your channel and your Twitter and just tell everyone where they can find you.
Yeah. Well, my final thoughts are pretty much this. South Africa right now is on the brink of becoming another Zimbabwe or another Congo. And unfortunately, because it's Africa, a lot of the world doesn't really care. But this is what's going to happen now is something that in about 10 years, the movie will come out and everyone will go, oh, it's so sad. Why didn't anyone do anything? Right
if only
now,
we knew.
That person is you. You are that somebody. People need to talk about this stuff. People need to spread the word. People need to contact whoever their member of parliament or local councilman is, spread awareness about this and start looking for ways to at least give the Boers refugee status or intervene. Because if this continues, Africa's gone, and it would be very sad to see Southern Africa go.
But at the same time, I also feel, and I'm going to incorporate that into my final thoughts, is the fact that you don't really solve problems abroad by just offering refugee status to those affected. During apartheid, people didn't just give refugee status to black South Africans and tell them, oh yeah, it's pretty terrible what's going on there. Just come to our country. You can come chill here. The international community put pressure onto the South African government to do better, to improve, to stop their discrimination. And I think that's what needs to happen in South Africa. The refugee status thing is, for me, just putting a bandage on a pretty bad wound. I think it's not going to solve the issue. I think it's going to lead to a much bigger issue in the future. And I'd rather see the international community condemning what's happening in South Africa and pressuring the government to actually do something about it, to not tolerate people in parliament talking about, literally, and I quote, we need to bury them alive. That shouldn't be tolerated. And people like Julius Malema shouldn't be allowed to basically go into parliament and spew outright racism and make racist and violent threats against a minority in his own country. I think this needs to be dealt with, and I think the international community needs to put pressure on South Africa. But at the same time, I always tell people the Boers in South Africa have memories like elephants. In the future, we will remember who stood by us, but we will also remember who shut the door in our faces, and we will not be kind towards you. We will make you remember. We will make everyone know that you ignored our plight, and you did not help or choose to help when you had the chance or when you could have done something about it. We're not going to let you get away with empty platitudes of, oh, if only we knew, this is so terrible. No, you have the opportunity, like Starbird said, you have the opportunity right now to make a difference. You have the opportunity right now to do something about it. And that's kind of where I want to end this conversation, is the idea of people, everyone has the ability to change the world in their own little way. Don't think that you're a little insignificant person whose voice is not going to change the world. There's an African proverb that goes, if you think you're too small to make a difference, try spending the night in a room with a mosquito. And that's the idea that I want to leave people on with the end of this stream. Don't feel that you're insignificant and you can't do anything about injustices and problems in the world. You can. Speak out. Give your opinion. Don't be afraid to speak your mind. And
you know why they call it a revolution?
Why?
Because it always comes around again.
Ah, perfect. But anyway, Mrs. Starbird, do you have any final thoughts that you want to leave the audience with?
I'll just maybe reinforce what you've all said, because I quite agree. Just like Horton Hears a Who, Dr. Seuss, I greatly respect his work. Just because you're small and you think no one can hear you and no one can see you, and it might feel like the rest of the world doesn't even acknowledge your existence, if all of you stand up and keep shouting, we are here, we are here, we are here, you might be able to save your country from being thrown into, well, out of the pan and into the fire, so to speak. But I want to just encourage everyone who feels that they're in that minority, wherever they are, whether it's South Africa or elsewhere, that they feel alone, that they feel that the people around them are even a danger to them, to their livelihood, to their families, to whatever's going on in their lives, that there are others like you, as you can hear from me and Mr. Starbird here on this stream, and everyone who has joined us. And you can even see the views on the videos and people in the YouTube comments and on Twitter who are in the same position as you.
Yeah.
So don't stop shouting. Keep trying. Even if it doesn't seem like it's working, I think that the pages of history will pick it up, and maybe things will be better in the future.
Yeah.
Yes, and I think that's an excellent point to end this very thought-provoking and interesting stream on. Thank you again, Starbird and Mrs. Starbird, for coming on. This was an incredibly engrossing stream, and I think the audience enjoyed it quite a bit. I'll definitely have you on in the future, and I'd implore everyone to go to Starbird's channel, check out what he's doing. He's creating some excellent content on South Africa just to keep you up to date on what's going on. People are always talking about asking me where can they find out more, what other sources can they use to know what the hell is going on the southern tip of Africa. And he's definitely a channel I'd recommend. He has the Caracal seal of approval.
Yeah, you can catch me at YouTube Starbird Disagrees. Just look for the blue bird or the green bird, and there's my channel. And I'm creeping up on 3,000 subs now, but I'm hoping to see more in the future, and I've got something special planned soon.
Great.
So that's me for today. Take care all, and I'll see you next time.
Cheers, guys. Have a good one.
Cheers, man.